I have some really strange video for you today. It has been just embarrassing anecdote after embarrassing anecdote from the G7 in France for Donald Trump over the last few days. And I really want to do this thoroughly. And that's why the entire show so far has been G7 related stuff. Donald Trump's only notable contribution to the G7, as I mentioned before, has been ruining a dinner with world leaders by insisting that Russia be added back into the G7 to once again make it the G8, which it used to be until 2014. He's contributed no ideas to better the planet. He skipped the climate change meeting. He's made no sense in almost everything he said. But the sort of height or the bottom of this embarrassing fiasco was Donald Trump's explanation of why he wants to add Russia to the G7. Now, I'm going to play the clip for you. It's under 90 seconds in duration. But in the clip, Trump attacks Obama on foreign soil, a bad look for presidents, says things that are just straight up wrong, which is not probably a shock to you, and seems to suggest that Russia should be back in the G7 because Putin took Crimea from Ukraine while Obama was president. I know that that doesn't seem to make any logical sense because it doesn't make any logical sense, but it seems to be what Donald Trump is saying. Let's take a look.
It was a President Obama. I'm not blaming him, but a lot of bad things happened with President Putin and President Obama. One of the things that happened was, as you know, what happened with a very big area, a very, very big and important area in the Middle East where the red line was drawn, and then President Obama decided that he was not going to do anything about it. You can't draw red lines in the sand. You just can't do it. And the other was in Ukraine, having to do with a certain section of Ukraine that you know very well, where it was sort of taken away from President Obama. Not taken away from President Trump, taken away from President Obama. President Obama was not happy that this happened because it was embarrassing to him, right? It was very embarrassing to him. And he wanted Russia to be out of what was called the G8. And that was his determination. He was outsmarted by Putin. He was outsmarted. President Putin outsmarted President Obama. Wait a minute. And I can understand how President Obama would feel. He wasn't happy, and they're not in for that reason. Now, I'm only thinking about the world, and I'm thinking about this country in terms of the G7, whether it's G7, G8. I think it would be better to have Russia inside the tent than outside the tent.
Why doesn't Trump name anything? An important area with a red line, Syria, a certain section of Ukraine that you know well, Crimea. Putin took Crimea, not from Trump, but from Obama. Therefore, Trump wants Putin back in the G7. So I'm trying to read between the lines here. I think maybe what Donald Trump is saying is that Obama screwed up with Russia. Russia took Crimea from Ukraine under Obama's watch. This embarrassed Obama, or it angered Obama, so Obama retaliated by unfairly kicking Russia out of the then G8. And that's a silly reason to have Russia out, so Trump wants them back in. Basically, what Trump seems to be trying to articulate in a completely failing way is Obama wanted Russia out, and I do the opposite of Obama, so bring Russia back in. Now, there are so many logical contortions or pretzels here. One is not everything that happens while someone is president is their fault. Like, is it Donald Trump's fault or responsibility that Argentina's economy is crashing even more right now? It's not. It's happening while Trump is president, but not because Donald Trump is president. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is that Trump sort of seems to be saying, since Putin outsmarted Obama and took Crimea from Ukraine under Obama's watch, he doesn't deserve any punishment for it. And getting kicked out of the G8 was Obama's way of punishing him for it, or something like that, which is bizarre. And then also remember that Russia was suspended from the G8 after annexing Crimea on the vote of all of the other G8 members, period. There are many criticisms that we can make of the G8 or the G7, which are valid. Number one, they're not doing nearly enough to fight climate change. That's a very significant and prescient criticism of the G7. They are perpetuating the status quo of damaging neoliberal globalization rather than limiting it. That is a fair and accurate critique of the G7. they are lacking buy-in from some major industrialized countries, more like what you see in the G20. But this is not only childish nonsense that Donald Trump is adding I mean, I'm calling it a critique, although to call it that stretches credulity significantly. It also is not even really adding to the serious critiques that there are of the G7 and of the ways in which these seven or the broader G20 nations control so many aspects of the everyday lives of so many people on this planet. And it's a waste of time. It's a diplomatic embarrassment. And it's a geopolitical embarrassment, quite frankly, for Americans who have to, if they understand what's going on. I know the Trumpists defend everything that the guy does, but if you understand what's going on, you see the U.S. embarrassed day after day, press conference after press conference by Donald Trump. And the sort of height of this is what I want to talk about next, which is that Donald Trump wants the next G7 at one of his golf clubs.